All right, Robbie, today on our podcast, we've got Mark Chou. He is now taking over Swiftwick socks, which I've had a relationship with for probably 10, 15 years as we've been doing this.
That's longer than my wife.
They were one of the first companies to send product over. And James Osborne, who is the Exchange in Tennessee, shout out to James.
The Exchange Running Collective? Is that the full name of the store?
The Exchange Running Collective, yeah.
Yeah, you're wearing a shirt. Nice.
Yeah, and if you're into those like boutique-y running spots, James has got you covered.
Yeah, in the Nashville.
So he's like, hey, I got this friend. He's taking over Swiftwick, and I want to introduce you to him. And so here we are.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy because it feels like socks are the entry drug into the apparel industry in running right now.
I like that. Yeah. Your first product into the running scene.
So how did you end up, getting in with Swiftwick and then deciding this is what you want?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story for me in some ways, but if I try and keep it short, spent 15 years in New York City after graduating from college, started off kind of doing the Wall Street thing, realized I kind of wanted to change, and then kind of ended up in consumer retail. So first stop was at Ralph Lauren, which was a great kind of boot camp experience for me. Learned a lot about retail, e-com, like how these businesses work, but then also quickly realized that big companies were not my thing at all. So in and out in 6 months, really used my employee discount a ton during that period of time. So I got my money's worth during those 6 months.
Do you have a sweater with a teddy bear on it?
Not at the moment, but I think I purchased, at least one teddy bear item during that period of time. So, and I do have an active eBay save search, I think, for like polar bear caps. So,
nice.
So that's still in the mix, still a fan. And at the end of the day, if you look at all the companies that I've worked at, they're all companies whose product I really believe in, still kind of stand by and, wear, consume, like even after I've left the company. And, it's kind of a key part of, I think, who I am as a person. I would never be able to work for a company whose product I didn't believe in. As someone who is very, I think, kind of marketing and commercially oriented, would never be able to, try and convince someone to buy a product that I wouldn't actually wear myself.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much the same way, right?
Yeah. This is actually, we've been talking about this a lot recently because I feel like there's a lot of, how do I say this? Influencers.
I think that the money right now being handed out for people to promote products is tempting for a lot of people who are trying to make that Instagram, TikTok money.
Especially because platforms like Instagram are really hard to make money on. So you got to pump out the ads. And I feel like there's a lot of people maybe pumping things out that don't believe in the product, where I will say that's the one thing I've always been proud about Believe in the Run is that anything we use or promote, especially on our podcast, is stuff we use all the time. Like the sponsors.
How many times have we turned down stuff?
I wish people knew how much stuff we've turned down. Like that would be free money. And
free money.
30-second ad spot here and there, but things like Element, Chair Bunny, like we use that stuff all the time.
So Mark, you said something.
Free plug, by the way.
I want to go back to something you said, and you just kind of glanced over it. But I think all of us, I think part of the maturation process for people is to figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And you see things as a kid and you're like, oh, wow, I'd love to work for X big brand, whether it's like Nike, Polo, whatever. You're like, oh, that'd be so cool. And then maybe your experience when you get there isn't what you expected. So you said that you kind of didn't enjoy big companies. What was it about that you knew wasn't a fit for you?
I think for me, there was a couple things, and, I don't want to, be, too blunt here, I guess, in some ways, given that we're talking to the public here. But I think for me, there's a couple things. One was that I think just the nature of a larger company, and this even applies to Away towards the end of my time there, which, we can go into at some point. but the larger company atmosphere, there's just more bureaucracy, more red tape. You move more slowly, and I love, what I've realized now, kind of earlier stage, smaller, faster moving environments, and you just kind of get shit done.
I love that. That's the nimbleness is something that I think people overlook as an advantage. Like when you can come up with an idea, turn it around, and execute on it. As the company grows, more voices are in there. You start to second guess yourself. And so I think I'm getting what you're saying. Am I getting it?
Yeah. And I think kind of on a related note is the fact that, once a company gets bigger, one of the things that kind of slows things down is that kind of politics and kind of interdepartmental rivalries or whatever kind of start taking over. Yeah, territory, fiefdoms, right? Yeah. And you start making decisions based on kind of, protecting your own or protecting your turf. It's not about kind of driving the business forward necessarily. And, all of a sudden you're at an organization that is, it can be easy to kind of lose sight of like, hey, we're all on the same team together. Just the other day, earlier this week at Swiftwick, we're talking about, kind of finalizing our holiday plans. What do we want to do? And, one of the things that we do want to kind of promote is all of our retail partners, right? And so we have hundreds of retail partners across the U.S. and then, also distributors and retail partners internationally as well. And at a certain point in time, in mid-December, e-com has like these like shipping cutoffs, right? Like if you order after this time, it's probably not going to arrive by Christmas. And, where else can you go? You can go to these retail partners. And, our head of e-com was saying like, yeah, like let's do an email, like let's promote our retail partners. And then our head of marketing, who came to us from Chaco, she was like, wow, you are the first head of e-com that I've met who wants to promote retail, wholesale business, because I think from our point of view, we're all in the same team together. We're all kind of striving for the same thing to grow Swiftwick, to make it, I think, a compelling brand that people love. And, why kind of, get worked up about like it's going through like retail partner versus going through online.
Well, if you look at big picture, if I'm at a retail store and I'm buying shoes, it's great. I can pick up a pair of socks. Now, I'm probably not necessarily going to run into that store every time I need socks. So it becomes an e-commerce, customer. And I think that happens. I don't know about you, Robbie, but when I first started running, the shoe store didn't have a colorway I wanted or something like that. Then I went online to hunt it down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same customer. It's just a different way. But before we get there, Swiftwick's been around for a while. I'm guessing it was a family-owned business. How did you get your foot in the door and turn it into yours?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, kind of, sort of tired of the Ralph Lauren kind of big company piece. Subsequently, kind of spent all my time after that working for like earlier stage consumer brands. Left away the luggage brand where I was an early employee after 4 years to start my own consultancy, and thought, maybe this is like what I want to do. I want to get back to the early stage, get to maybe try and recreate some of that early away magic. And I think that was great for that period of time. COVID hit. I had an 18-month-old at the time, and then we welcomed, our second kid in 2021, which is like a whole crazy story because we, the 3 months before and after baby number 2 came, we actually spent in Hong Kong.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool.
And so, we wanted to be a little bit closer to family. My wife's from Hong Kong, lots of family still there. And so I think that was great because once we got there, it was kind of like life as usual versus like in New York City, it was kind of crazy. But in order to
Hong Kong was more open than New York?
Hong Kong was way more open than New York, but getting in was the difficult part.
Okay.
We had to quarantine in a hotel room for 21 days.
With a kid?
With a kid.
Dude, no way. You can convince. There's nothing.
Dude, there's not enough.
So she was, I think, 2.5 at that time.
That's worse than solitary confinement.
So that was
that would be good at Guantanamo. They should just put a 2-year-old in with those guys. They'll start talking.
Oh they'll chirp right away. Right away. Yeah,
totally. But But yeah, fast forward, like, it is that kind of COVID exhaustion in many ways that kind of starts kind of putting this kind of a seed of a thought in our minds of like, yeah, maybe raising a kid in Manhattan is like more tiring than it needs to be. And so we had some friends who were moving to Nashville. And then my parents are still in Birmingham, where I grew up.
Oh, wow.
And so, in some ways, like, while Birmingham still feels like it's maybe just like a little bit small, and that Nashville is, slightly more cosmopolitan, has a little bit more kind of consumer retail happening there. Still within driving distance of grandma, grandpa, which is great. And they just came up for kind of the end of fall break last week, which is fun. And, 2 weeks before we moved to Nashville, I actually get a ping from a friend, that I know from New York who now lives in Nashville saying like, hey, there's this company, Swiftwick, that's looking for a new CEO. Do you want to chat with it? And I'm like, yeah, totally. This sounds great.
Were you familiar with them before that?
I was not familiar with them before that.
Okay.
And I think, that from my point of view is actually representative of, I think, the huge opportunity that we have. And at the end of the day, kind of this CEO search was part of a kind of broader reset, if you will, of the company where, you have a couple of, new board members coming in, folks who actually have like really great prior and current like brand operating experience, and I think really understood brand building. One of our board members is currently the CEO of a kind of Nashville-based menswear company called Imogene Willie, and previously was CEO and co-founded Billy Reed with Billy Reed back in the day. And so, he's one of these guys who I actually really wanted to meet up with anyhow. After moving to Nashville. And turns out he's like, like conversation number 2 as far, in terms of my interview process.
Cool.
And so, the opportunity I think that they kind of identify with the company is like, wow, here's a company that makes really great product. It's all made in the USA. There basically isn't a kind of, performance sock company that is all kind of exclusively still made in the USA.
Right.
And
because there are some sock companies out there that are made in the USA, but they're usually
a little bit more hike oriented, a little bit merino.
Yeah.
And
like Darn Tough is a Vermont brand, but they're also mostly in the hiking realm.
Exoscale or whatever it's called.
Exoskin. Yeah.
Exoskin.
But then you have, but right. So it's not too many still.
Yeah. And I think, just the fact that, I think Darn Tough, to their credit, has done a great job with kind of like, they've really made it clear that like what they're about, right? Like that Vermont heritage, being made in Vermont is a huge part of, their brand identity. And, there's naturally a lot of, quite a high level of brand awareness of Swiftwick in kind of that, like Middle Tennessee and then even kind of Southeastern region. But what I kind of actually discovered was that a lot of folks who, know about Swiftwick, even those who live in Nashville, don't necessarily know that it's a Nashville-based brand or that, that it's made in USA and actually mainly manufactured in Tennessee as cool. Well. So much kind of storytelling opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That has sort of gone by the wayside. And so given kind of some of these more sort of brand-oriented folks who have kind of come into the business, I think they were looking for a leader who kind of shared some of that kind of mentality. And so, after moving, to Nashville a little over a year ago, last summer, continued the interview process kind of in person once I arrived. And then I guess I'll be hitting my 1-year anniversary like in a couple weeks.
Cool. So, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you think, I see a couple challenges in the sock industry, especially for running. So one, do you think it's tough to convince people that this is an important part of their gear, that buying a 12-pack thing of cotton socks from, Walmart or something isn't going to be the best option for you when it comes to footwear? So I guess I'll start there. Is that a challenge for you guys?
So yeah, I think when you think about building brands, oftentimes I think there's sort of like a twofold aspect to it. One is, assuming that someone has already bought into the idea of like, I want, running socks, performance socks. There's a question of like, okay, why choose us, right? But I think what you're sort of pointing to is kind of this category education piece, right? Why are performance socks as a category even necessary, period? And I do think that that is a current challenge still for kind of that category. I think there's, progress being made, so to speak. And I think there's more awareness of that in terms of what the benefits of, moisture wicking, kind of performance materials, compression, kind of, stability technology as well. When you're talking about, kind of this mainly red sock here that features kind of basically kind of our high
zones and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so, kind of tying in a little bit to kind of your shoe world, right? Where you have like, talk about like visible tech and, talking about, some of those things. And I think there's some of that in kind of the sock world too. But, I do think also it's one of those things where I feel like, you take a look at running shoes like in the 50s, and then you kind of take a look at what, like Bowerman and Knight and like the Cortez did, right? And then from, there to like, where we are now, like even just in the past 10 years alone, the amount of innovation in the shoe world is kind of insane, right? So we're talking about all the foams, carbon plating, all the things, like just in 10 years, it looks so different. Like, and, just in the span of like 10 years from like, like the mid 50s to like the mid 60s, like huge advancement too. With socks, I don't know. I do feel like it's a tougher thing, right? Like, I don't think like socks are in some ways like that different.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of Robbie here. Robbie, before you had access to quality socks through Believe in the Run, you don't seem like the kind of guy that would have.
How dare you?
You seem like the kind of guy that would save a couple bucks.
You're not wrong. Yeah, I'm trying to even remember what I ran in before I was doing Believe in the Run. I think it was probably cotton. There's no way I was spending
like Nike outlet by a pack of 6.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I still have. I don't think I ran in these, but I'm pretty sure I still have a pair of Columbia socks from like 12 years ago. But yeah, I mean, I guess kudos to them. But yeah, I didn't really think about it too much. But now that I've tried,
well, you have
more
specific
premium socks,
and I know what your preferences are.
Yeah.
So shoot, I will say that if you want to sell Robbie a sock, you use a merino sock.
So what's weird is that I don't love merino for race day. I think it sometimes tends to give me hot spots, but for cold weather runs or just in general, I love merino everything in general.
Especially that we make a merino sock, right?
In the wintertime.
I don't know if you know
I do. I have a couple pairs of. I'm wearing a merino.
I'm actually the opposite of him. I don't like merino
I'm wearing a merino shirt right now. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of merino. But if it's just in the summertime, I still like a max cushion sock. I'm not a thin.
Even in the summer?
I am not a thin sock guy.
I'm a thin sock guy.
I just don't.
Socks.
I don't like the feel of thin socks on my foot. It's a tactile feel.
Cushion is for the shoe. And then for me personally,
I
like it thin for
I understand. For it's not even that. It's just the tactile feel of a thin sock weirds me out.
I get it. When I put them on,
doesn't make sense.
I get like even I won't mention competitors' names, but there's certain socks they make 2 different levels. Like the elite sock for racing is usually micro thin, and then for daily it's a little bit thicker. And I would say for me, I'm good synthetic all day long.
Yeah.
And I more often than not will go with a thinner sock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too that, and it might be because I have a more narrow foot like you. I feel like if I'm wearing a thinner sock, it's just
you want to fill up the shoe.
Yeah. Like I feel like my foot slides around more. So that drives me crazy.
Yeah. This shoe, I would like a thicker sock, but
yeah.
I'm wearing the Evo SL for those who can't see.
Now there used to be a time in my life where I just didn't, in the summertime, I just never wore socks, which is disgusting. but
you were kind of like Huck Finn back then.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, there's whole summers I didn't even wear shoes. But yeah, so
wait, you'll wear a shoe without a sock? To me, that's the lowest life form.
it really
like boat shoe.
it's
okay,
disgusting.
but sneaker.
Just
I feel
go
like
ahead.
is-
No,
Shame
you're
me.
it's gonna turn that into like
Shame me.
a smell.
I don't
like,
do it anymore, but this
Okay.
is
Like,
I
I have
would
a-
say for a long time, especially.
I have another friend who goes by Rob, and he doesn't wear socks. And
Shout out to the Robs.
you know him, and he takes off that shoe, and I'm like, dude, that's gross.
It's disgusting. No, I'm not gonna lie. It's horrible. Like even my kids wearing Crocs in the summertime. I'm like, those things smell awful.
Yeah.
So, anyways, socks with Crocs. Opinions on that?
I mean, if you're Gen Z, great. If you're my age, I don't know.
I
guess
like
I
a
don't
sock
know.
with Croc. Yeah, I'm a sock
Are
with
you
Croc guy.
hold up? Are you a crew sock guy or a no show?
So, I mean, I will, be very open about my geriatric millennial kind of status as, historically a no-show
Yeah.
person. And I distinctly remember in middle school, I think, I think I had ankle socks at the time. They weren't, kind of the full crew,
Right.
but they were ankle socks. And then, as someone I think who has always been kind of like fairly observant about clothing and then how people represent themselves through clothing and brand choices and that kind of thing. For me, I'm kind of seeing like, hey, like there's this trend happening, and people are wearing these like cool no-show socks, and then probably asked my mom for them at some point in time. She's like, no, like you got perfectly good socks, and so I distinctly remember taking my socks and lowering them to no-show length.
Yeah. Oh, did you
folding over the
fold
front?
back? Did you fold over the back over the heel to get a no show?
You guys are horrible.
So it's the front of the sock. So I scoot it down,
Oh.
right, and then there's all this like excess hanging up front, and I just flip it over to the top of my foot.
That's an interesting method. So I would just take the sock and fold it under my heel to make it no show. Do you know what I mean?
So basically, for you, there's like extra like
Yeah.
padding like under the base of your
Yeah.
foot here,
Yeah.
and then I have extra on.
And
the top
also,
of my foot.
this is why I ended up going just not wearing socks, because I was annoyed with that.
It's painful.
And I was like, dude, I'm not gonna. At the time, I don't think I knew where to buy like real no-show socks, because it was. I don't think people were making them at the time, like the real no-shows.
Yeah, H&M was making them. You could get like
No, but this is like
they never stayed up.
this is
though.
like late 90s.
late 90s, yeah.
And I was like, I'm just not gonna wear socks.
I don't know. I go the opposite. I like a low to no show when it's tight season, but I like a crew with shorts.
Yeah.
I
But
think where it started for me.
you don't feel like you're just trying to be cool though?
No, there's a couple reasons I do it.
Okay.
For starters, I think that when stance socks were hitting their most popular phase, they had the graphics or something on the sock or the design that I liked. So I liked showing that. I like being able to like some of the other socks that had like wild colors or something like that. I went through like a phase of that.
Yeah.
Second
Yeah,
thing,
there's more storytelling when you have more cuff
Yeah,
to work
I
with,
get
right?
it. I get
So-
it.
and
Okay.
then two, I really don't like the way my ankles look.
That's fair. That's fair.
Like
Now-
they look like a brain at this point.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense. They're so veiny. But I will say that I feel like we fought for no-show socks for so long that I'm just not willing to give up that territory. And to these young millennials wearing Crocs and socks or
That's
whatever.
what I feel about like shorter shorts. I don't want to go back to knee-length shorts.
Yeah. Dude, when are we going to start wearing cargo shorts again?
You
That's
know
the
it's going to
question.
happen. You know that people are going to like right now. If someone's running in basketball shorts like from the '90s, they go past the
Yeah.
knees. You're like, psh, you know that's going to come back in style. Somebody's going to bring it, and then I'm going to not go there, and they're going to be like, look at the old dude in the 5-inch to 3-inch shorts.
I mean, Babenzine came back in at J. Crew or whatever as like creative director there or whatever, and then you have like the big chinos, right?
Yeah,
that
right.
are back in now, and so yeah, I mean, the cyclicality of fashion, right?
Pleated chinos.
Dude, we got to stop pleats, please.
Yeah,
Don't
I'm
do-
always flat front though. Like I don't care about kind of the fashion trends and whatever. Like
That's I have to say
I'm
one
with-
thing that
I'm
is
with
nice about getting older is when you can let a trend go by.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things that you can just buy and they'll still be class. Like a good pair of jeans, a good pair of jeans.
Well, he worked at Polo. Half their stuff is like
Yeah.
just
timeless type.
Different
stuff.
finish, different, but the fit is generally pretty similar.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that. Like I mentioned, Stance Socks, which I think was the first company to kind of break through and be like, hey, socks is part of your choice that you are showing the world how you fit in or whatever. Whether it be by doing a rock and roll featured sock, or whether it's a movie theme or whatever it was, they were like, hey, here's how you can express yourself. And then I feel like that's kind of died out, but we've seen this rise of other socks coming into the running community. And like you mentioned that the crew sock is probably the most popular right now. I think it's great also for the sock brand because it allows you to put branding, visible branding. Like if you have a no-show, nobody knows you're wearing Swiftwicks.
Yep.
You have this red sock here on the table. It's got the Swiftwick going up and on the side. You're going to see that right away.
Yeah, totally. I think that, thanks Gen Z, I guess, for helping us out, I guess, on the sock brand front. But I do think that that's, a definite aspect of how a brand can stand out. And I think if we go back, kind of tying this together with one of the prior questions, and like why like performance sock, right, and that sort of thing. But, within this world, so much of it is often very functionally oriented. Here's what it can do in terms of wicking moisture, in terms of helping with compression,
Arch support.
Arch support, like, plantar fasciitis this, and, like...
Wait, do you believe in that? Because you guys had a sock for plantar fasciitis. Do you believe that sock helps with plantar fasciitis?
So for us, we, and to be honest, like I don't know all the details of like exactly how we marketed socks, and we've also retired sock lines over the course of time as well. There's no sock that we currently had that is like marketed as a plantar fasciitis sock, for example. And from my point of view, like I think there are, I think it's one of these things where like you can have socks that like, that can work for certain people for a certain purpose, right? There's always like something that can kind of be helpful for someone, and then like the same thing like doesn't work for another person. Same thing with like shoes and kind of how you just feel like it fits or it doesn't fit and that sort of thing. And so I don't want to kind of downplay that, but for me, that's less of a kind of how I would view at least socks in terms of kind of their functional purpose. I think shoes, I think definitely important. I think there's a lot of stuff that you can be doing kind of on like the PT front, for example, and kind of strengthening this and that and whatever, where, you can kind of help with pain. Like for me, I don't know that socks would necessarily be kind of like my, first place to go, but other people may have different opinions.
Could be a tool in the toolbox.
Do you guys white label for any other brands?
So, it's sort of a, fine line, I guess. At what point in time does it become like, this is white label like collab versus, and then like collab is like white label.
I'm talking like they wouldn't know it's a Swiftwick. Like say that you were making socks for a company like Tracksmith.
Yeah. So that's not something that we really do right now. We do, we will be making, I think there's going to be more kind of in the pipeline in terms of kind of the more like collab front, but,
So are we talking about Believe in the Run sock?
well, let's chat.
All right.
Let's keep on chatting.
I like it.
We get another Robbie edition no-show in the Thomas crew.
Yeah, let's do it.
You have to, it has a dotted line that you have to fold under your heel on my pair.
Yeah. Here's how you turn it into a no-show. Yeah. But yeah, like, so Rogue Fitness, is, one company, they have a custom, Flight XT sock, like this red sock here, kind of our, top of the line, if you will.
That's actually my favorite sock.
Yeah. I think, this is the one that Nick Bear wears when you see him like working out too, like, barefoot or whatever, like this is the sock that
Nick Bear barefoot. So wait,
it's really,
you don't like crew socks, but you like this one.
Yeah.
And this one does come in a lower
there's also a
cuff height
low
too,
cut version of it. But I do like that version. I mean, in the wintertime, I wear it pretty often. Like I said, it's dirty right now, so it's probably somewhere in a dirty laundry pile because I'm
Are you
We've
good
been
with
traveling for 2 weeks, and I
are
don't
you
know
good
what's
with
happening.
this is a technology I think you need to develop. The sock that won't disappear.
Oh, dude, I have an entire sack of socks
Of onesies?
singles, just in case the other ones show up. Sometimes I'll just shake them all out and just like start doing
Just
a
check.
match thing, and then I'll find a couple that match. Okay, put them in my drawer. But yeah, it's actually one of the Lagoon pillow sacks, like full of missing socks, and I'm like, how is this possible?
My wife and I think it was during COVID, we're spending like a lot of time together. It's easy to get on each other's nerves when you have
Trapped
like
in a hotel with a 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, that as well. And so I think the helpful thing that we did was like we made up a fictional roommate. Her name is Cheryl.
Oh.
So whenever,
she
there's like
hot?
a missing sock,
sounds hot.
yeah. Whenever there's like a missing sock, let's call her, kind of, more like a grandma figure, right? So like,
Less hot.
Grandma Cheryl, just like, she doesn't know what she's doing. And like, she misplaced a sock. Like she broke the dishes. Like,
I thought it was
and
just
so-
basically Dobby, the house elf from Harry
Yeah.
Potter, but
No,
just
because
a
if you give
grandma
him
version.
a sock.
Yeah, he's always trying to get a sock though.
Yeah, but if you give it to him, he's free. He's gone.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. But yeah, so
That grandma's
anyways, I feel like
there.
that was helpful for us. But
I have to use
this
that.
conversation.
So you just
reminded
don't
me,
wait- hold on,
I think we should do a pocket for an AirTag.
AirTag,
Oh,
that's it.
that's
So,
sick. Yeah. Hold on. So do you blame the grandma for everything or just the socks?
It was more kind of a general like catch all, like something is a point of friction, right? And it's Cheryl's fault.
Does that help
Cheryl
diffuse
again.
the situation?
I think for us it was actually helpful.
Really?
Yeah, it just became like a kind of a funny thing, like, and just sort of like acknowledging like, okay, we're kind of like frustrated, and like maybe like I'm probably more the person who like kind of like jumps to blaming more than my wife does probably. So like I feel like for me, just like having like another default person to blame was helpful as far as
like this.
that marital
This
dynamic.
reminds me of a bad joke. If you guys are willing to sit through a bad joke, I'll tell it.
Well, should timestamp this for Carl? A bad joke or inappropriate joke?
A bad joke. I mean, it's just it's a
Okay,
joke.
all right, go ahead.
So this guy's at a bar and he's drinking all day, right? And he ends up throwing up on himself,
Yeah.
and he starts crying. And
this
the
Carl?
bartender says, "Hey, what's the matter, man?" He said, "Well, I told my wife I wouldn't drink anymore, and I just threw up and got my shirt dirty." And he goes, "It's easy. Just tuck $20 in your front pocket. Tell your wife some drunk threw up on you and gave you $20 for dry cleaning. You're off the hook."
Nice.
So he goes home, tells his wife the story. This other guy did it. And she goes, "Yeah, but there's $40 here." And he goes, "He shit my pants too."
That's a good one. All right, I do like that. That was a good joke. All right. Sick. We need to start interjecting more jokes into our content.
There we go. Anyhow, back to the socks. How many employees work at Swiftwick?
How much does it cost to wash a pair of socks? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're right around like 20 employees.
Okay,
right
so
now.
it's not that big. I would think that to make socks in Tennessee, you'd need a few more people.
Yeah. Does that include the manufacturing as well?
So manufacturing is through manufacturing partners, of which we have a few. We're not kind of counting all those folks kind of in the sort of like full-time mix.
Okay.
But we do our own fulfillment in-house. So this does include our
that's a
warehouse
lot of
team.
work.
Of a handful of folks, kind of plus, sort of like the traditional office folks, but we're actually all, sitting in the same location.
Yeah.
Kind of combo sort of office plus warehouse space. We just moved as well a few months ago. We had, let's say, call it a more like Dunder Mifflin kind of look and feel previously. I think
Everything was beige.
Yeah, everything was beige. Carpet was beige. Desks were beige. And as far as kind of just an overall kind of rebrand and relaunch is concerned, right?
Yeah.
I think this is one of the ways that you kind of manifest as a brand as well, right? You clearly care about how your office looks, and you're kind of investing in upgrading that. And I think for us, it was kind of a little bit of a similar story. And so, next
think
time
the
you guys are in
environment-
Nashville,
yeah.
definitely love to have you over.
I'd love to go to Nashville. I think the environment is like the other employee. It's like if you have a bad environment, it's like having a bad employee. It's like it's not going to help people do better. We've just went through all this stuff where our place was totally turned upside down.
Kind of still is.
Yeah. And I think it was stressful,
Yeah.
but
I mean, yeah, we haven't been in the office for what, 6 months?
Yeah.
8 months.
So I'm thinking, like, when I think of this right now, I think of like Tim West with Bandit, who started with socks and kind of has now turned it into a more
Like broad apparel
yeah,
company.
broad apparel company. Is Swiftwick like laser focused? Like, hey, this is what we are. We're going to do the best at this. Or is this now with you as being the new guy? Or you have plans to kind of like expand the offerings?
No current plans on that front. You know, we've now 16 years been focused very much on socks. You know, I think whereas, you know, Bandit is very much a kind of, at this point, broad play, but then very running focused. You know, we are very, I think, narrowly focused on socks, and, you know, have narrowed our focus a little bit kind of as a result of our kind of rebranding and reset on the endurance athlete. But this is inclusive of, you know, runners, cyclists, triathletes, but at the same time, you know, we do have, you know, one pair of socks that is actually super popular for golf.
I was going to say golf.
As well.
Yeah.
And PGA Tour Superstore, you know, carries a bunch of those. You know, side note, Adam Scott won the Masters wearing Swiftwick.
Nice.
Back in the day. Yeah. And, you know, we make a cut resistant hockey sock too. Okay. Actually that is pretty popular in with NHL equipment managers, and the one kind of non-sock product that we do currently make is actually a cut resistant wrist sleeve. So if you actually look at any of the recent Florida Panthers hoisting the Stanley Cup photos, you'll actually see
that's cool.
A Swiftwick wrist sleeve on there. So, you know, we've had, you know, quite a broad, and in some ways I think maybe slightly too broad of a focus previously, and part of our rebrand is really kind of bring back to that core endurance athlete focus. And so that's kind of how we see kind of the next, you know, few years going. I mean, you never know like what might happen.
Well, and you do, so the CLA collab caps is that just a limited thing, or was that?
So that's a limited thing. Okay. You know, I think you know, we'd totally be down to, you know, make another. I think that, you know, the reception was pretty good. And I think it's nice to see that, you know, people do have, you know, enough kind of affinity for the Swiftwick brand, even with kind of the opportunity that we still believe that is to come, to want to actually, you know, like rep a Swiftwick cap. You know, I think that's, that for us is kind of indicative of something. And so, you know, maybe it'll kind of be a little bit more like merch oriented, right? I don't see ourselves.
I feel like almost if there's a couple nice quality, cool t-shirts or something, or limit, I feel like, I don't know, it just seems like there's so much apparel that, but I will say the branding that you got, the rebrand that you guys have done, I was pretty impressed with. When I went to the site, I was like, oh, this is actually looks, no offense to old Swiftwick, but I was like, this actually looks cool. Like whoever did the rebrand really did a great job.
Is it a total rebrand? Because the logo
is the same, right? Or
so
mostly?
fairly similar.
Okay,
but it's you know, the name is the same. You know, like the wick, or like, you know, the kind of this V here, which we're trying to kind of build this brand lore of, you know, this being like when you cross the finish line, right? This is kind of your pose, right, and kind of representative of having kind of like endeared to the end of the race, right? There is an evolution of kind of all of that. But yeah, it's still fairly subtle, so that someone who was already familiar with the brand previously, it wouldn't be like kind of like super obvious to you that happened. And kind of on a practical note, just as far as like manufacturing is concerned, you know, like managing kind of the inventory, kind of reset of like new socks. 'Cause with the new rebrand, you know, we are creating new socks with kind of the new logo, very slightly different, but you do kind of have to kind of cycle through all of that one by one. And so the fact that it is a fairly subtle change makes it, I think, easier to make that full transition.
Yeah. I like the, I don't know. It's just, I feel like, especially with socks, they can be, I don't know. There's something about them where you still want it to be cool, even though not people don't always see them or notice them. But
I think it's a treating yourself kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Like for me, you have favorite socks in your drawer. I know when you go through, like we have our bin of socks, and you cycle through to, oh, that's one I enjoy.
Yeah.
And like, you're like, why don't I just throw these other ones out? And you're like, I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
And I think that, two things to kind of mention on the socks, and kind of going back to the point around, like performance socks and kind of features and whatever. Like, I think a big part of, the opportunity is to also be able to create so let's distinguish, Swiftwick of yore as, perhaps being a little bit more of a manufacturing company that makes products, but maybe not necessarily a brand per se, right? What does a brand do? A brand hits you in the heart. It evokes emotion, right? It's not just a left brain functional purpose, right? It kind of, it's right brain, right? Or it's a little bit of the heart. And so, if you think about, like for me, and I know that, Nike has had its kind of ups and downs and what have you. And, it sounds like people are pretty excited with new leadership, right?
Sure.
And all of that. But I think that new leadership kind of represents like a certain period of, Nike's time that was more about heart, right? And you can kind of see that in all the out-of-home ads and kind of billboards and whatever that you saw in Chicago too, right? You're like, wow, like feels a little bit like a return to roots kind of thing, right? And for me, as someone I think who was a kind of a fan of that Nike and kind of like really drank the Kool-Aid, for me, a lot of times like buying Nike is not necessarily like because of the functional benefits, and sometimes might actually even be in spite of the functional benefits.
Totally.
Like on a pure functional basis, like maybe this like, X brand shoe might actually be theoretically like a little bit better.
Oh, absolutely.
But man, I feel like I got to have a Nike because, and so I think that's the other piece of, I think, brand building that I think is our big sort of, challenge and opportunity for Swiftwick is like, yeah, I think we have, great technology and, great manufacturing, great quality, all those sorts of things. But that's only part of the equation. In some ways, like it's almost just like, it's like table stakes, right? And what do you have on top of that?
We see the way that the brands, especially in the running industry, it's pretty transparent how they build the emotional connection to the consumer, or why, look at New Balance right now. I feel like they're really killing it with the lifestyle side, who they're bringing on as representatives of the brand. And you see Parker Valby now coming on to the athlete side. They've had they're athletes, Emma Coburn, like
Sidney McLaughlin,
Shohei
Ohtani.
They have legitimate athletes on this side, and they have entertainers and kind of tastemakers on the other side. You can see what they're doing, but that's shoes and apparel. The same thing, you can see it, and Nike had it with when their training clubs were doing well. You could see that kind of transparency, and plus then you had the collaborations with, entertainers. Is that something that you're going to try to bring into the DNA of Swiftwick?
I think it's something that's definitely on the table for sure. Like obviously kind of like, big athlete, endorsement deals or whatever. Like candidly, I don't know if that's in the budget for 2025, right? I've literally been working on that the past week. But I think actually what's even more important, and I think, this was kind of discussed, I think for ASICS as well in 2017, is a big part of it is like actually getting back into community, right? As like a really crucial part of, kind of that company's sort of like return and, subsequent growth. And I think for us, this is the case with, us being at Believe Run Club last night, right? And kind of being in kind of the Baltimore, DC area kind of all week. And then, we have kind of, we're kind of continuing to do these kind of city tours, if you will, and kind of all starting with Nashville back for our kind of relaunch week back in August. And I think the team, I think that, that I inherited when I first came on, there were definitely a few kind of, more kind of hardcore, kind of distance runners and cyclists and such. But there was also a lot of people for whom, like, I don't know that mattered that much. And, candidly, like whether or not someone in accounting is doing this, like, sort of like neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about like, marketing function, like creative functions, I think it's important to really like understand, like, how do you actually like get in the mindset of an endurance athlete? What's important to them?
Authenticity.
Yeah, authenticity. And so, for me, like that really is kind of the core of like what I've really been trying to, push the team towards. And, like HR policies are, in some ways like not the first thing that you think of when you think of like creating like a brand and culture and whatever. But one of kind of just the small tweaks that we recently made that, I thought was kind of like an important part of, us kind of moving in that direction is like, hey, every quarter you're going to get, like X $100 of race entry reimbursement.
Yeah.
And so like, we want people to kind of get out there. We want to enable you to do that. And so, once again, a small detail and, some people will take it and some people won't, but I think it's also kind of like important symbolically.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up ASICs, and I think one of the things that was kind of like a convergence of a lot of different factors that brought them back. I think the product was making a turn for the better. Like we started working with them right around that time, and the product was coming into the what I would call modern running, and they run with it, and they probably have one of the best lineups of shoes out there. And at the same time, their marketing department was smart enough to see kind of like what was trending in the space. They recognized, the voices on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, the people that were leading up run clubs and stuff like that. And they kind of saw what was shifting. And I think they even had some pushback from running retailers, because running retailers used to get this budget, or Runner's World got the budget for advertisement. Now there's this section of, okay, well, that's moving over here. And then the retailers didn't love that. So now they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we take this run club and squish it back into the retailer, which is strange to me, because then it's like, okay, is that now the retailer's run club? But it's like, it's a slippery slope. But when you look at that, like sphere of influence in running and how you would want to grow your brand, where do you see the biggest opportunities?
So I think a big part of, early stage kind of brand building, and, while Swiftwick's been around now for 16 years, like I think there is kind of this reset in a way. We are kind of like, back in kind of the startup mentality.
It's been around, right? But I think when you talk about brand, there's an emotional expectation, and there is something that you're like, okay, this is what it means to be wearing this brand. Like you said, Swiftwick has a name, and I would say, okay, yeah, quality socks.
Yep.
But other than that, there's not an emotional connection. And I'll be honest with you, at this point, I still would say, okay, Swiftwick versus this other running brand sock, how does it feel different, or how does it tie into things differently? And you obviously have your work cut out for you. Yeah,
for sure. And it's only been like a couple months since the launch. So, I think I and the team and the board, I think we're all aligned. Like, this is a like longer term strategy, right? It's not about, trying to, like discount a ton and, drive revenue that way. It's about kind of like building on the fundamentals, and that does take time. And, I appreciate that I have.
You're a private company, right?
We are a private company. And, going back to kind of the original question, I think, it can be easy to overextend yourself. You see like all these things that the, kind of bigger brands are doing, and like, hey, there's like, this, should we be at, the expos for all the majors? Like, do we have it in our budget to like fly to Tokyo and Berlin and whatever? And, I think a lot of it kind of comes down to like, where can you build, momentum in a way that is like cost effective, right? And I think, I don't building brand momentum, I think comes down to like being able to kind of get to a certain sort of like, critical mass threshold among a certain group of people, however you define it, whether it's an online community, or you're talking about kind of a specific geographic area, and then kind of using that as kind of the beginning of like the flywheel that then expands, right? And I think for us,
I don't think Expo's it anymore. I don't know. Do you like maybe the first time marathoner or something?
Yeah,
but
more so Shakeout Run than Expo.
Yeah,
that would be my belief. But
I feel the same way. I mean, it seems there's just so much going on at the expo.
Plus, there's that like you're competing against a person selling those. What's that brand that's like the white label brand for everything? They've just got buckets of shorts and buckets of all that stuff. It's just a weird space. You're not really controlling the way that you're presenting, other than in your booth.
I mean, I guess everyone has to come through the expo, but at the same time, I feel like sometimes it's so overwhelming that it's hard to stand out in a way. But like you said, if you do come to a shakeout or do something like that, that's an easy way to connect on a really personal level with a few hundred people or 1,000.
Yeah. And I think for us, as we think about, some of the things that we're doing that are kind of more community oriented, right? I think that's, very much in line with what you're saying. And I think for us, being like really investing kind of in our kind of like sort of home turf radius, right? I think is a big part of what we're planning to do. One of the things that we're also working on is, so James Osborne, who you mentioned before, he's now working for Swiftwick as well, helping us on kind of both the sales and the community side. And, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity in terms of, I think, run specialty and the extent of that market that is still kind of untapped for us, right? And I think, there's something to be said about, a certain type of run specialty too, and kind of the tiers of that, in terms of like the extent to which a certain retailer is like really a tastemaker, right? And, or not. I think that's really important. And I think that being, important for us as we think about, like who do we want to make sure that we're in? Like, this person does volume and that's important, right? But then,
that's the big but. Like it's tough because I know you have 20 employees, you want to make profit, you want to be a successful company, but at the same time, there's a sweet spot, I think, in that zone of like, if you're in the know and you're in the mix, that this product has a special feeling. Yeah. And when you get to, if you go to certain running retailers, you see a wall of socks, you're going to pick the color or the length that you like and throw it in the box. And maybe you got 15% off for buying shoes. That's not like, if I was building a brand, that's not where I'd want to be.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
But speaking of the sock wall though, right? I think this is something that we did think about a lot, because this is a point in time at which, that is a context in which like a lot of people are making sock buying decisions, right?
Sure.
And candidly, like, for the most part, you're just like, oh my gosh, these all kind of look the same. Like, how would you even like know where to start? And so I think for us, and, you've seen some of the new packaging now, which I think, in my opinion, is like a huge upgrade from what we had previously. And part of our sort of like North Star kind of idea that we were really thinking about a lot as we were designing this is like, okay, this may not be the case for everyone, but like we want to create packaging in a way that, one, conforms to kind of existing conventions of being able to kind of touch and feel and see the sock, that it's important, that we know is important for the sock buying process in a kind of brick and mortar store. At the same time, we want to not conform in such a way that, okay, because of the design of the form factor, whatever the case is, that the kind of that the sock and the packaging as a kind of cohesive whole is such that maybe, just maybe, there's actually the possibility that someone might buy the sock because of how it looks.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of ties a little bit more into that.
I think,
like, what does it evoke in terms of emotion, right? Like, oh, wow. So because of those colors and the way that kind of this language, you know, is like, it resonates with me in a way where I look at everything else and I'm like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
And so once again, it's kind of small steps to be made in terms of kind of bringing the brand back. And, you know, I was talking to someone at, you know, Run Club last night, and, you know, ASICS has kind of been working on this, you know, kind of this like new strategy since like 2017. This person was saying like, hey, like from their point of view, like ASICS has like really come back just in the past year, which is to say like it took sort of 6 years of that to the extent where like someone, I forget, you know, exactly like, and I don't know exactly what their kind of background is, but like from their point of view, like it was really in that last year where they feel like
they must be a Super Blast fan.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
were they wearing Super Blast?
I don't think so. Yeah. But yeah.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I truly believe that it's a blessing and a curse to be something that's like trending, because I do feel like certain brands, that you have it, and if you're hot, you can sell socks all day long for a certain period of time until the next person comes along. And we see it like, you know, I see it like with Tracksmith and Bandit. I see them as two. Now people are identifying, there's like one group of people that's like, okay, I like Tracksmith.
Yeah.
And then there's another group that's like, yeah, Tracksmith's for the older runner. And if you want to be into the new stuff, you got to go with Bandit. And I'm like, that's such a dangerous spot to be, because as soon as, like you said, the Gen Z with the high socks come in, the next brand sweeps in underneath. So you'd always be chasing kind of that cool factor. So that's a place that's like tough to balance.
Yeah.
You gotta have, and that's, you know, I don't worry about Tracksmith so much because the quality is so good.
And also, I think they have such a distinct look and feel. And, you know, I remember, I think there's like a very early like podcast interview with Matt, and he was talking about how like his vision for the company was very much to kind of combat what he called like the Power Rangers aesthetic.
Yes.
Right. Of performance apparel.
Right.
And I thought that like really resonated with me. And actually when I was, during kind of my consulting time, you know, had, chatted actually with both Matt, and Nick from Bandit about like, oh, like maybe can we work together? Like we were kind of both, I think in both cases, like introduced by mutual friends. It didn't quite work out in kind of, either of those cases, but it is kind of funny how I kind of come full circle and like into the running world. And yeah, I think it's, you know, incredible what both Matt and Nick and Tim have done with their companies. And, you know, I think in a way like, yeah, they are like inspirations for us in terms of like, yeah, like this is what you can do when, in terms of like creating something that is, yeah, emotionally evocative, and like thinking of, I don't know, just, the Tracksmith, you know, Church of the Long Run.
Yeah.
So great.
They
right?
both have done a really good job of world building. So like you go into Tracksmith and it's not just the product. It's the feeling that when you walk into a store or an environment, it feels like what you would romantically think of as like maybe, you know, an Ivy League, you know, kind of an experience.
Yeah. It's almost like you feel like you walked into a Dead Poet Society
Or Harry Potter.
scene or Harry Potter. I know.
But then Bandit's doing the same thing, like the blowout they did with ASICS last year for the New York City Marathon with the subway car. They're creating an experience around a product that isn't necessarily about the product. And I think that especially now is key in entertainment as far as getting me to buy into the hype.
Yep.
It's like it's a whole world that you come into.
Yeah. I think world building and kind of, like creating brand worlds, that's, I think, hitting the nail on the head in terms of, how you ultimately create that emotional connection. So,
yeah.
All right. We're getting towards the end here. Is there anything you want to ask Mark before we go?
I don't think so. Just let people know where they can find the socks. We'll put the link in the description as well.
Yeah. So come visit us at swiftwick.com. Am I allowed to give a little something extra for listeners and
Absolutely.
viewers?
Yeah.
Yeah. So use Believe 15 for a
Nice.
little welcome code for first time orders.
Yeah,
there we go.
Get in that.
And the holidays coming up. So like everyone needs socks. Stocking stuffers, right? Yeah,
for stockings.
Yeah, exactly. So we have. I think it's still in process. We are about to, I think, finally launch our dealer locator on our new
sweet.
website.
Cool.
But you can find us at a whole bunch of retailers near you as well. A lot of the fleet feeds, plus more kind of like the smaller independents too. So
Cool.
I think their question and answer FAQ should be Swiftwikipedia.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, it's pretty good.
There we go. It might be trademarked though,
Yeah. We'll think about it. Yeah.
All right, Mark. Thank you for coming out and thanks for joining us on the run yesterday. And we'll keep you on our feet.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks so much.
See you, dude.